Shanti Prima Satya Ahimsa. Dharma Shanti Prima Satya Ahimsa. Dharma Shanti Prima Satya Ahimsa.
Salam everyone, welcome to our panel for Sidetrack Episode 4, using discrimination to evaluate internet content. To help us with this and to give us their expertise and their advice are three wonderful panelists, Brother Chandu, Sister Tharani, and Sister Krishana. So jumping right into the questions, the first question I have for you is, how do you differentiate between facts and perspective? A lot of the times when we're on the internet, when we see a statement, it's hard to tell sometimes whether that's a factual statement or if it's just someone's opinion. So how do we tell the difference between that?
Thank you for the question, Rohit, Sairam. You know, so much content on the internet is about perspective, right? Beauty, news, travel, and the law is certainly no different. If you read blog posts or articles published by a law firm or an agency or a government entity, they will present their perspective. They should present their perspective. For example, a plaintiff's law firm, this is a law firm that represents people who are in an accident, who are injured in an accident. They will appeal to how you've been wronged or how an insurance company has a lot more money or power. They'll appeal to the reader as a victim. And on the other hand, a law firm that defends corporations against large corporate actions, security or something like that, those articles might have a more analytical approach on how to protect company interests, you know, in light of the law compared to other similar situations. But the actual law is what underlies the perspective, and that's presented in the blog or the article. So no matter what side the blog or the article or the writing is on, there is some reference or some underlying law that is the basis for the argument. That law is the fact that you can refer to. Sairam.
Anyone else want to add another insight to this question?
Sure, I can add a little bit to that. Salam, everyone. So I work in a slightly different field. So I work in communications, and oftentimes when trying to differentiate between truth and perspective, or between fact and perspective, what I look for is descriptive words. So for example, if it's someone's perspective, there's often a lot of emotion layered into the statements. So if a reporter is talking about something, say, I feel XYZ, or I think XYZ, that's a very good indication that it's their opinion and it's not the actual fact of the matter. When I'm looking for facts of a certain subject or a certain topic, I will check for things against various different sources to filter down information and see where information is consistent across different sources. And then I also look to official websites such as .gov, so that means government websites, or .edu if you're looking for university sources, right? Using sources like that are a good way to just kind of dial down your sources or narrow down your sources a little bit and find facts. Numbers are often a good indication of factual information. So looking for numbers, percentages, things like that, data-driven information. So those are some of the differentiators between fact and perspective for me when I'm looking on the internet.
How much of the information that you gather right now, how much of it comes from print sources like the books, encyclopedia, newspapers, versus a website or an internet source?
Yeah, it's a good question. It honestly depends on what I'm doing and what I'm researching. If it's typically a low involvement task, I may resort to the internet first and foremost, just get a general idea, to be more exploratory in nature. Obviously, if it's a more higher involved task, you want to typically consult multiple sources. So the way I kind of say this is, if I'm going to order another printer cartridge or going to read about printer cartridges, that's a low involvement task. But if I'm buy a new car or looking to refinance my mortgage or things like that, that's a higher involvement task. When it's a higher involvement task, my general approach is multiple sources to gain multiple perspectives. Now, it varies by what I'm doing. So if it's anything academically related, I may start with the internet, and I typically go to something like Google Scholar because it gives me some articles that are more scholarship oriented and are peer reviewed. I mean, the concept of peer review is very central to doing research. But in addition to that, I'll be looking at journals, I'll be looking at various databases and whatnot. If it's related to matters of business and some of the things that I do, again, the .gov sites are very helpful because they give you a lot of guidance in terms of legalities and rules and things of that nature. When it's along personal lines, consumer appliances or electronics or whatnot, I like to refer to trade publications. So various trade publications are experts in their coverage and their research on various matters. For me, I remember when we had our first child, I didn't know anything about, cribs, our car seats. So I would go to Consumer Reports. And, when it comes to electronics, I like to read CNET. When it comes to medical stuff after you have children, I'm not in the medical field, so I defer to my wife as a starting point. But things like, mayoclinic.org or Cleveland Clinic, or the Merck Manual or the CDC. These are some of the different sites and reference points that I use. So in a nutshell, it depends on what I'm doing, but to gain a wider perspective, it's always good to consult multiple sources.
For the next question, I'm going to ask Sister Dharani because in the professional field, especially when you're doing researching for a case. I was wondering how you evaluate the authenticity of the information that you gather.
Sure. In the legal world, it's about getting to the law, and the law itself is the authentic source, right? This is what was explained earlier. It's looking up statutes, state statutes, and that's available online. It's looking up government publications where they refer to state statutes, federal statutes, and also case law. So that is definitely a given. The most authentic information would be the law. But another issue definitely has to do with facts, and how do you determine the authenticity of facts, right? That's another piece that's really important in the legal role. Right now in my job, my work is focused on contracts. So we revert to the actual contract. There's a concept of looking at the four corners of the contract. So we don't add a lot of extraneous detail, but what does the actual contract say as a starting point? In other types of law, one definitely needs to look at facts presented. Swami gives us the example of 4 visually impaired people with an elephant, and each touches a different part of the elephant and describes 4 different things. In a car accident, for example, 4 witnesses will have very different, very different accounts of what happened. And some of the questions we ask as both a professional and as an individual is, are the facts reasonable, logical, well-founded, appropriately motivated, credible? But also in the legal realm, there might also be some expert testimony, scientific evaluation, right? But definitely these values of, is it reasonable, logical, well-founded, appropriately motivated? That's a big one, right? Because oftentimes you can see a click to buy something at the end of an article, and that's definitely an indicator of motivation. And credible. Is the source credible? Sairam,
thank you so much for giving us a legal perspective on that. And I want to hear from Sister Krishna next, because since you work in communications, I was wondering what approaches you take to make sure that in your realm, when you are gathering information, how do you determine the authenticity of that?
Yeah, definitely. I think Sister Tharani covered so much of it very beautifully. And in communications, we work very close with our legal teams to verify information. So my first source is always going to the attorneys on my team to verify information. But also, Swami says, let your conscience be your guide. And I think that's a very important piece that we often miss when we are doing research. If something feels like it's so outrageous that it doesn't make sense or something's not clicking to you, that's a good indicator that you should probably dig a little deeper and look a little further, see if these things align to existing beliefs, right? Or your existing understanding of a certain topic that you're researching. The internet is two-sided, right? On the one hand, like, you can get a lot of misinformation, you can get a lot of things that, the best example I think is, my mom often will say, oh, this auntie sent me this thing on WhatsApp, or this person sent me this, and I'm like, can you please send me the thing that you got on WhatsApp, because it's probably not right. Not everything you get on WhatsApp is accurate information, right? So cross-referencing that across various different sources, seeing where things are coming from, and then seeing if they line up to other things across the spectrum of the internet. There's so many different sites, and so making sure that the articles kind of, that there's a consistent narrative, right? If you're researching a topic that is broadly and widely understood, there are going to be many different sources, and you can cross-reference and check. The other good way to cross-reference sources, and I often do this, is not only listen to sources that let's say, share your opinion or view about something, right? We live in a very divided society where certain sources are considered good, certain sources are considered bad. But I think looking across various sources so that you get a 360-degree view, a 360-degree perspective of the topic that you're researching. So these may not necessarily be facts, but it will give you a broader understanding of like the spectrum of information that's out there. And it'll also arm you with the ability to defend something that, let's say, you find that's untrue, right? Like, so just being able to do that, because I think oftentimes when we're researching different topics, especially in the field of communications, you get into conversations with reporters who will then throw questions your way that are challenging, or coming from the opposite side of the spectrum, right? And so being able to understand various different perspectives and then come to your own conclusion. I think those are some of the techniques that I employ. But again, you can never go wrong looking in a few different places. Never put all your eggs in one bucket. Never look at just one source. Your best bet is to look across various different sources and then cross-reference information.
This next question I want to ask Brother Chandu, because you are a college professor. I am a college student. So I have this question that I've always wondered about, and I'm sure other current students or other past students have wondered about, is when I submit an assignment, I've always wondered how the professor makes sure that whatever facts I'm saying or whatever statements I'm making are actually, factually accurate. So when you get assignments from a student, how do you make sure that what they're saying is correct and they're not making it up?
Yeah, it's a great question. It depends again on the nature of the assignment. So let's take a research paper of some sort. I think a lot for me personally comes down to the rubric that I assign or use to evaluate the assessment. And oftentimes with the rubric, I can stipulate, must have a minimum of 10 sources. 2 of them can be internet based. X can be from books. The other remaining, should be from peer-reviewed journals. So, that guideline helps the student, but it also helps me. Furthermore, I really believe in the importance of, in-text citations. When you write something, acknowledging the work of others, acknowledging the multiple work of others on a particular topic and whatnot. So I actually look at that very closely to see, what are the in-text references? Are they, factual? Are they, has it been done recent? Is the work of a recent nature? Whatnot. Additionally, oftentimes when you write a paper of some sort, there's a lot of literature review. Merely than just stating a bunch of stuff, I also look a lot for the coherence of thought and how someone has taken all that information and made sense of it. Right? It's not enough just to merely state something, but what is the meaning associated with it? What is the outcome of all that information? What are we recognizing from the past research and the past information? And then finally, I would add, that reference page becomes very crucial to me as well. As I pointed out earlier, the number of references, the type of references, the date in which those references were quoted and whatnot has a huge implication. There are obviously software programs out there that can, decipher if a reference or whatnot is, factual, current, up to date and whatnot. And I tell my students up front, when you write a paper or whatnot, I'm going to push it through Trinidad.com. I'll an authentic paper from an inauthentic paper. I know what is plagiarized and whatnot, so don't try it. Again, Swami's teachings come to mind here as well. The first thing is I watch, and I watch carefully. And I like to kind of watch for 5 things, or what I call the 5 W's. First would be who wrote, where's the source coming from? Who wrote those sources? Who is the researcher behind those sources? In other words, was the piece of factual information written by an expert, someone, professionally competent in the field? Are they an individual of credibility? And tied to that, oftentimes I look at the source from the viewpoint of, was there a sponsor behind the source or an affiliate? And was that acknowledged in some of the writing, in some of the secondary research? Mm-hmm. So the who is important. Then comes the what. So the what to me is what methodology or what, or how was the information collected? Was it based through, subjective, methods like, a case interview or more focus groups oriented, or was it, objective in the sense that, it had some research basis to it, from a sampling perspective, or was the study representative of a population or whatnot? So the who, the what, where was the source published? Was it journal? Was it, something that came through a professional a body of some sort? That becomes very important in terms of, being able to evaluate the legitimacy of the source. So we said who, what, where, when was the source written? When was the article written? Is it something that's current, or has it been something that's been written about many, decades ago that may not be as pertinent today? And I guess lastly, why? Why was the author? Why was the paper or the article written? Were they trying to showcase a certain finding or a certain viewpoint?
For the next question, I would like to hear from Sister Krishana. As we know, you work in communications. Are there any tips or that you can share with general users of the internet? Tips that you use in your professional life that you think can translate well to us that are normally using the internet?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't repeat the things that I've said before, but one other way to do this is to check the domain name, specifically when you're looking on the internet. So lesser known facts, EDU stands for educational sites, GOV is government. If it's .org, it's a nonprofit. And if it's a .com, it's typically a commercial site. And these are more credible websites suffixes. So edu, gov are the most credible, and then org and com respectively. But if you're looking at a domain name and it says .as, .net, .y, you know that that's probably not a credible source of information. And so, checking for domain names is a good way to also just do a cursory check of whether the source could be credible. And then, of course, taking a closer look at the source. So we talked about cross-checking references, but another way you can do this is if you're looking at articles or if you're looking at blogs and so on, perhaps they have an author listed. And if the author is listed, you can do a little bit of a deep dive on who this author is, maybe look up their LinkedIn, maybe look up their, their profiles online to see if the author of the article is credible. Domain name is a cursory check, but it's often what gets people when it comes to scams. It's like you'll get a thing that's like, oh, this is from the IRS, but it's like irs.net.256. And then you click on it and it's a virus, right? And so making sure that it's irs.gov. And that's like a really simple thing that people often get caught on and is a good way to check for credibility.
Are there any real dangers of being misinformed that we are probably taking too lightly?
Yeah, I think the primary danger of misinformation is that it spreads like wildfire, especially now that, all of us are on the internet. So if you're just looking at something for yourself and doing some research for yourself, you want to be well informed. You want to know what's right versus wrong. Swami talks a lot about having a sense of discrimination, but the primary danger in misinformation is that it spreads. And so if you are going to, let's say, post something on your social media channels, or if you're going to go to SSE class the next day and share something you found with, 10 other kids in the class, you want to make sure that you're sharing the truth, right? And so making sure, again, to go back to all those tips and techniques and all the various ways in which we verify information before you start to share it with other people. And I think that, you can take that one level deeper, and let's say, it's misinformation that's related to a medical decision, or it's misinformation related to something that could potentially hurt someone. You want to be very, very careful about the information that you're sharing and make sure that you verified your sources, because that could potentially harm someone. And again, if we go back to Swami's teachings, right, one of the 5 values is truth. So making sure that we're looking for the truth and we're speaking the truth and we're sharing the truth. And Swami also says, help ever, hurt never. And I think there is a danger of hurting other people, even with our words, even unintentionally sometimes. So we need to be very careful in how we're informing ourselves, and then, in turn, how we're informing others.